The morning my wife handed me divorce papers, I was on my second cup of coffee. I remember thinking the French roast tasted particularly good that day. Dark, smooth, no bitterness. I had just opened my laptop to check the pre-market numbers when she walked into the kitchen in her work blazer, set a manila envelope on the table next to my mug, and said, "I need you to sign these, Marcus. I've already spoken to my attorney." I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at her. Then I took another sip of coffee. "Okay," I said. She blinked. That one small word clearly wasn't the opening line she had rehearsed a response to. She'd expected something else. Tears, maybe. Or anger. Or at the very least, confusion. Instead, she got a man calmly setting down his coffee mug and reaching across the kitchen table for a legal envelope like it was a utility bill. "That's it," she said. "Okay." "That's it," I said. What my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife Diane, did not know in that moment was that I had been waiting for exactly this conversation for almost 4 months. I knew what was in that envelope before I opened it. I knew because I'd already spoken to my own attorney 6 weeks prior. I knew because I had spent 3 months quietly, methodically, and very deliberately making sure that when this day came, I would be ready. I was ready. Let me back up. Diane and I had been married for 18 years. We met at a professional development conference in Chicago in our early 30s. She was in marketing. I was a financial planner with a mid-sized firm downtown. We were both ambitious, both independent, both the kind of people who made 5-year plans and actually stuck to them. We didn't have children. That was a choice we made together, early on, and one I never regretted. Our life was structured, comfortable, and for a long time, genuinely good. I won't pretend the marriage was perfect. No marriages. We had our seasons of distance, our stretches where we felt more like roommates than partners. But I thought we had built something durable. 18 years is not an accident. 18 years is a decision you make every single morning. And for a long time, I believed we were both still making it. I found out we weren't on a Tuesday in February. I had come home early from the office. A client meeting had been rescheduled, and I didn't feel like sitting in an empty conference room until 5. I pulled into the garage around 2:30 in the afternoon, walked through the side door into the kitchen, and heard Diane on the phone in the living room. She didn't hear me come in. The garage door had been having issues with its motor, so it closed quietly, without the usual grinding sound. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just a man walking through his own house. But then I heard her laugh. Not her regular laugh. Something softer, more careful. The kind of laugh that belongs to a specific kind of conversation, and the moment I heard it, something in my chest went very still. I stood in the kitchen and listened. I couldn't make out every word. But I heard enough. I heard enough. I heard "I knew and I miss you too, and he won't be home until 6. I heard a tone in her voice that I hadn't heard her use with me in years. I heard her say a name I didn't recognize, and then I heard her say, "I'll see you Thursday." I walked quietly back through the garage, got in my car, and drove to the end of our street. I sat there for about 20 minutes, staring at the stop sign on the corner. Then I drove back to the office, sat at my desk, and stared at my screen until 5:30. I did not say anything to Diane that night, or the next day, or the one after that. I am a financial planner. My entire professional life is built on the discipline of not reacting emotionally to bad information. When the market drops, you don't panic sell. You assess, you plan, you position yourself for what comes next. You don't make your worst decisions in your worst moments. I applied that same logic to what I had heard. Over the following 3 weeks, I paid attention in ways I never had before. I noticed that Diane's Thursday evenings had become consistently unavailable. Always a team dinner or a client event. I noticed she had started keeping her phone face down on the counter, something she had never done before. I noticed she had joined a gym she almost never used, but was very particular about her schedule there. I noticed small things. A new brand of shampoo. Texts she typed standing slightly turned away. A hotel charge on a credit card statement I saw by accident, 22 miles from our house, on a Thursday night when she had told me she was working late at the office. By the end of March, I knew everything I needed to know. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't need to. I had 18 years of knowing this woman's patterns, and her patterns had changed in a very specific direction. I didn't need photographs. I needed a plan. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney, not a referral from anyone Diane knew, a name I found completely independently. And I sat across from her in a quiet office on the 14th floor of a building across town and laid out our financial situation clearly and calmly. Our shared assets, my assets, her assets, our mortgage, my retirement accounts, the investment portfolio I managed personally, the structure of our finances, which I had always handled because that was the arrangement we had settled into early in our marriage. My attorney was thorough and direct. She told me exactly what I was entitled to, exactly what the process would look like, and exactly what steps I should take before any paperwork was filed. I took every one of those steps. By the time Diane placed that manila envelope on the kitchen table, I had already done everything my attorney recommended. The financial accounts were documented. The asset disclosures were prepared. My position was protected. And I had my own set of papers. Not a dramatic flourish, just a practical reality. My attorney had already drafted a dissolution agreement that reflected an accurate and complete picture of our shared assets, more accurate, as it turned out, than what Diane's attorney had prepared, which contained several notable issues. So when I opened her envelope and read through the documents that morning, I was not surprised by anything I found. I recognized the strategy. I understood what her attorney was attempting to do with the asset valuations. And I set the papers down next to my coffee mug, looked at my wife standing in the kitchen in her work blazer and said, "I'll need you to use a different set." I got up, went to the desk in the home office, and came back with my own envelope. I placed it on the table. "What is that?" she said. "A more complete version," I said. "My attorney prepared it. The numbers are accurate." She stared at the envelope, then at me. The color had shifted slightly in her face. "You already have an attorney," she said. "I've had one since April," I said. The silence in that kitchen was unlike anything I had experienced in 18 years of marriage. It was the silence of a person realizing that the scene they had scripted and rehearsed is not the scene they had scripted and rehearsed is not the scene they are actually in. "How long have you known?" she asked. Her voice was quieter now. "Long enough," I said. "Long enough to be ready. I want to be clear about something because I think it matters." I was not performing calm in that moment. I was not suppressing rage behind a composed exterior. I spent 4 months moving through the grief of this privately, in increments, at a pace that allowed me to actually process it rather than explode. By the time Diane handed me those papers, I had already arrived somewhere on the other side of the worst of it, not healed, not indifferent, but steady. I had already mourned the marriage before it officially ended. That is not strength. It's just time, and the willingness to use it wisely. Diane did not go to work that morning. She sat down at the kitchen table, and we talked for 2 hours. She did not try to explain or justify. I give her credit for that. She knew I wasn't interested in explanations. What she seemed most unable to reconcile was the simple fact that I had known, had said nothing, and had spent that time preparing. She kept returning to it, circling it, like it was something she couldn't quite fit into the frame of who she believed I was. "You didn't say anything," she kept saying. "For months. You just... nothing." "What would you have wanted me to say?" I asked. She didn't have an answer for that. The man she had been seeing, his name was Daniel, she told me eventually, a director at the company that handled her firm's advertising partnerships, had apparently been a significant presence in her life for nearly 8 months before that morning. She said she had not planned it. She said a lot of things people say in those conversations. The things that are probably true in pieces and insufficient as a whole. I listened. I did not argue. I did not need to. We signed my attorney's version of the papers 3 weeks later. I won't walk through every detail of a legal process because that's not the part of the story that matters. What matters is that the agreement was fair, genuinely fair, not strategically favorable to either side. My attorney had made sure of that. And in the end, Diane's attorney agreed to the terms without significant negotiation. The numbers were accurate. There was nothing to argue about. I moved out of the house in August. I had already found an apartment. A 2-bedroom on the north side of the city, high floor, clean lines, good light in the morning. The kind of place I would not have chosen when I was trying to maintain the aesthetic of a life built for two. I liked it immediately. It felt like something chosen, not inherited. The weeks after the move were the strangest part, honestly. Not painful in the way I had anticipated, but disorienting in a very specific way. The disorientation of suddenly being responsible only for yourself after 2 decades of orienting your daily life around another person. What time to eat, whether to leave the television on, whether to buy 1 set of towels or 2. Small decisions that had previously been invisible became briefly, strangely significant. I adapted. Quickly, actually. I think I had been adapting internally for months before the official transition began. I heard through a mutual acquaintance in late October that things between Diane and Daniel had not continued past the summer. I don't know the details, and I didn't ask. I felt nothing particular about it, not satisfaction, not sympathy. It was simply information, like a line item in a report I no longer needed to track. What I did feel, and still feel, is something harder to name. It's not relief, exactly, though there is some of that. It's something closer to clarity, the particular clarity that comes from having your life suddenly simplified, stripped of pretense, of performance, of the low-grade cognitive dissonance of living inside a situation you know to be untrue. The marriage had become a fiction long before I found out. I had been the last one to learn what I was living in, and once I knew, I could not unknow it. There is a version of this story where the central character is victimhood, and I understand why that version is the first one people expect. Betrayal invites that narrative, but I am not interested in being a victim of my own life, and I was not going to hand 18 years of my own history over to that framing. I was 52 years old. I was good at my work. I had my health. I had a 2-bedroom apartment with good morning light. I had, for the first time and longer than I could remember, total clarity about who I was and what I wanted. I could work with that. About 2 months after I moved out, I got a call from my college roommate, whose name is Patrick, and who I had been genuinely close to before the slow attrition of adult life and geography had thinned the connection to a text on each other's birthdays. He had been through his own difficult divorce 3 years earlier and had come out the other side, from what I could tell, reasonably intact. He called because he'd heard, through a friend of a friend, that I was going through something similar. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," he said, which I appreciated. "But I am going to tell you that I had a very good therapist, and I am going to send you her number." I used the number. I am not embarrassed to say that. I am a person who believes in professional expertise in any domain. The therapist's name was Dr. Karen Osei, and over the following months she helped me understand some things about myself that the marriage had kept comfortable enough to avoid examining. Not a dramatic excavation of childhood wounds, nothing so cinematic. More like a careful inventory of patterns, the way I had mistaken competence for intimacy. The way I had spent years managing the marriage rather than inhabiting it. The way that I had felt the distance between Diane and me growing for years and had responded to it the way I responded to most problems. By making a plan, by optimizing, by finding better systems, rather than simply naming what was happening. I had kept the household running smoothly. I had been financially responsible, practically reliable, and strategically calm in a crisis. What I had perhaps not been was present in the way a marriage actually needs. I am not saying this to excuse Diane's choices. I am not. What she did was a choice, and it was her choice, not mine. But understanding my own part in the long decline of the marriage gave me something more useful than anger. It gave me information I could use going forward. I said that once to Dr. Osei, and she wrote something down, which I took as a good sign. By January, I had settled into my new life with a thoroughness that occasionally surprised me. I had rearranged the apartment, started running again, something I had done in my 30s and abandoned in the busyness of marriage, and reconnected with several people I had lost touch with, including Patrick, who turned out to be exactly the kind of friend I needed at exactly the kind of friend I needed at exactly the right time. I do not have a dramatic final scene to offer you. My life is not a movie. There was no moment where Diane appeared on my doorstep and realized what she had lost. No cathartic confrontation. No tidy symbolic ending. There was just a man, in his early 50s, rebuilding his daily life with the same patient attention he had always given to the things he cared about, and finding, somewhat to his own surprise, that there was more to build on than he had expected. What I do have is this. On a Thursday morning in March, about 7 months after the papers were signed, I was sitting in a window seat at a coffee shop near my office with a cup of French roast and a copy of a report I was reviewing for a client. The morning light was coming through the glass at a low angle. The street outside was still quiet. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And I felt not happy, exactly, because happiness always sounds too temporary, but settled, like a foundation that had been tested and held. I thought about the morning in the kitchen, the envelope, the second cup of coffee, Diane standing in her blazer waiting for a reaction that didn't arrive. I picked up my cup, took a long sip, and went back to the report. The French roast was excellent. No bitterness at all. If you've been through something like this, or you're in the middle of it right now, I want you to know something I wish someone had told me earlier. The period right after you find out is not the time to make your most important decisions. I know that goes against every instinct you have. Every instinct says react, confront, demand answers, do something. But the most important thing you can do in that moment is slow down. Talk to a professional, a legal one first, then maybe a therapeutic one. Protect yourself carefully and quietly, and do not mistake activity for progress. The storm passes. It always passes. What matters is what you've built before it arrives, and what you choose to build after. I am still building. I expect I will be for a long time, and I find, more mornings than not, that I'm actually looking forward to it.